on this, but I do a shout out because the staff are just superb. It's really all about their service. But a bit of a shout out, Cindy, for the baristas, because I don't know how they do it. I don't have the technical expertise to make a coffee like some of the coffees I've been drinking.
Courses, you can go and learn.
Quite hard to make a really good coffee, isn't it?
Oh,
it's very easy to make a bad cup of coffee.
Exactly.
I think the freshness of the beans, and I mean that's the difference between sort of.
No, it's actually in the making of it, just the way they make it.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to use the beans that have already passed through the digestive tract of a cat?
No, that's a mouse type reptile, and you can buy those beans overseas.
They've already been pre-digested.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
You're kidding?
No. So a friend of mine bought me back them from overseas. It's beans that have been eaten by something and then passed up.
I heard it was a cat.
Oh, gosh.
Boots
I like the long shot.
The long shot?
In Podsby Road is where I go to have coffee.
Good on you. Boots and Cafe Car in Thornton Bay, Coromandel, Nick Ward and City Missioner, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. I'm Wallace Chapman. I am back tomorrow, 3:45. Till then.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki Te Reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei. The wind goes out of the sails for America's Cup fans here after Team New Zealand rejects 99 million reasons to hold the regatta in Auckland. Farmers at Fieldays pumped the accelerator on petrol ute purchases. Return to sender Mike King hands back his Queen's honour, claiming the mental health system is broken. Racist rubbish? The showdown over a bin sticker in Te Reo Māori. The young Olympic swimmer who wasn't even born the last time New Zealand won a medal in the pool. Could the country's only oil refinery convert to making biofuels? And a quacker of a story. Allegations that dandy ganders infiltrated a flock of ducks, resulting into a very strange hybrid creature.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. Health officials are preparing advice on whether people vaccinated for COVID-19 should be allowed to skip a stay in managed isolation when arriving in New Zealand. The Director General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, says a range of factors are being considered, including the date a person was vaccinated and from what country they came from. He says there may also be conditions such as pre-departure testing.
I imagine it will be hard for people to travel abroad unless they are vaccinated. You know, we're thinking seriously about what our requirements will be for people, at least in the sort of medium term, to travel to New Zealand, and the expectations around pre-departure testing, vaccination, and then other measures once people arrive here.
6% of New Zealand's population are fully vaccinated as of midnight last night. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the government had to weigh up the benefits to taxpayers when considering its bid to keep the America's Cup in New Zealand. Team New Zealand has rejected the almost $100 million offer from the Crown and Auckland Council, making it likely the Cup will be held overseas. Ms Ardern says she had hoped the next defence would be raced in front of home crowds, but she says what the government and council put on the table was a good offer.
There is a point at which we start losing the economic benefit by just having invested more than we should have. And so we've been mindful of that all the way through, and the team know that too. They don't want to be in a position where people don't think it's justified.
Jacinda Ardern says there is a chance Team New Zealand could come back to the government and council if it can't get a better offer. 2 people have been found dead at a house in Pukekohe this afternoon. Emergency services were called just after 3 this afternoon after reports of a sudden death. The police say they are trying to piece together what's happened and their inquiries are in their very early stages. Officers will remain at the scene throughout the evening. An expert in online hate speech says major web platforms have been embarrassed into taking action to prevent its spread. Sanjana Hatotua was speaking today at a conference on terrorism in Christchurch. His job for Otago University involves trawling through thousands of online messages every day so he can get a handle on what's driving hate speech. He says events such as the March 15th terror attack have shown the serious consequences of allowing it to spread unchecked, and that internet platforms are now taking action.
And what they don't do is going to create a bad news cycle. And it seems to be the case cynically perhaps, but realistically, that they are concerned about that.
Sanjana Hatutua says if authorities want to do a better job of tackling hate speech, they also have to look at what is happening in wider society. Thousands of farmers flocked to the first day of Fieldays today, the Southern Hemisphere's largest agricultural event. 2 years ago, the last time the event was held at Mystery Creek near Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, it generated $500 million in sales for New Zealand businesses. Some of the big ticket items are utes, and with the recent policy announcement, farmers are expecting to pay fees when they buy fossil fuel vehicles for their farms. Richard Watson travelled to Fieldays from Te Reo and brought a new ute that's due to arrive in August.
The fact is this Volkswagen I'm looking at now goes up $6,000 in January. Goes up just to pay for a battery car, which we'll not be able to use because we're too far away from any city. So the battery car is no good to us.
Richard Watson says the levy on new fossil fuel vehicles feels unfair for those in rural areas who have no alternatives. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. Had New Zealand won the World Cup at Lord's 2 years ago, the chances are Black Caps batsman Ross Taylor wouldn't be playing in the Test Championship final against India. The Black Caps dramatically lost the 2019 one-day final to England on a boundary countback. Ahead of the inaugural Test Championship final, which starts on Friday at Southampton, the 37-year-old 107 Test veteran says had New Zealand come out on the right side of that dramatic final, there's a very good chance he'd have called it a day. Taylor's teammate, wicket-keeper BJ Watling, has already confirmed Friday's match will be his last, but won't be getting emotional about it.
I'm just looking forward to playing another Test match. It is an exciting one. I'm certainly pretty pumped to be in the final. So look, I'm just going to go into it as I do sort of for every other test and, go through the processes of trying to win a Test match.
Warriors fullback Reece Walsh hasn't had an emergency call from the Queensland Rugby League selectors amid talk of a shock state of origin call-up. After a 50-6 thrashing at the hands of New South Wales in Game 1, Maroons legends Wally Lewis and Cooper Cronk are among those calling for the 18-year-old to be selected. Walsh says while he'd relish an origin call-up, Warriors coaching staff are against the move. Assistant coach Justin Morgan says it's too early for Walsh to be thrown into the origin cauldron. World champions France have started their Euro 2020 football campaign with a 1-0 win over Germany, while Portugal beat Hungary 3-0. That's the news.
A counter-terrorism meeting racked with controversy.
We were the victims of terrorism. We have felt it here. We have felt it with our blood. We are feeling it now.
Revelations of 2 mass shootings foiled.
In both cases, it was because someone in the public saw something or heard something that concerned them and made that known.
And rising violence leads a pub to photograph its patrons.
If we do see any issues of violence, we're able to try and figure out exactly who these people are.
Keeping watch. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, partly cloudy, a few showers. Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods, a few showers until tonight and then again tomorrow morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa mainly fine. Isolated showers for Wairarapa spreading elsewhere tomorrow afternoon and evening. Waikato to Wellington, including Central High Country, also Marlborough and Nelson, cloudy periods, occasional showers, possibly heavy in the west tonight. Widespread rain developing in Marlborough tomorrow afternoon. For Bulla and Westland, a period of rain tonight, otherwise a few showers clearing southern Westland tomorrow morning. Fiordland, partly cloudy, isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning, becoming fine then. And Canterbury, Otago and Southland mostly cloudy, patchy drizzle turning to rain in Southland tonight, elsewhere tomorrow. Chatham Islands cloudy with periods of rain, possibly thundery tomorrow morning. RNZ National. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā e hoa. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New Zealand's Cup looks set to become, well, someone else's. Team New Zealand is entering discussions with other nations keen to host this 37th America's Cup after rejecting a multi-million-dollar offer of support from the government. The decision's left Auckland businesses and fans crying foul after COVID-19 border restrictions limited fanfare at this year's regatta. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
It's the sailing snub Team New Zealand isn't keen to talk about. Principal Mateo Denora shushing Checkpoint's questions as he arrives outside the syndicate's Auckland headquarters. Chief Executive Grant Dalton also escaping out the back gate after news broke the teams declined the government and Auckland Council's offer of almost $100 million in cash and in-kind support to keep the regatta in the City of Sails.
So it's hush-hush from both the team principal and the CEO when it comes to taking Team New Zealand offshore to uncharted waters. But some of the businesses down here at Auckland's Viaduct weren't so quiet.
When we last spoke to Tricky Hartley, director of the conservatory, it was America's Cup race day one.
As long as this regatta goes on, that's good for you guys, I imagine.
It's amazing for us, you know. It's like winning the bar lottery down here. Obviously that got taken away from us initially with COVID.
Today, Mr Hartley, one of North Wharf's more outspoken bar owners, didn't mince his words.
I think the general consensus would be for the amount of money that we paid for the last time, you know, the country and, you know, the city certainly didn't get, you know, what the taxpayer had paid for. So my feeling would have been that there would have been an understanding by Team New Zealand that that was a sort of a debt owed to the people.
Mr Hartley says he's incredibly frustrated, pointing out a 37th America's Cup in Auckland with open borders would have been 10 times better than this year's edition.
I think it's incredibly disappointing that after such a successful event in such trying circumstances and with the amount of money that's been spent on the infrastructure in this area alone that hasn't been utilised to its full advantage, you know, this actually would save the money to have it here. And all the other teams, you know, everything is set up for them to do it here. So why not defend this one here and then look outside for other commercial opportunities?
Good Luck Coconut restaurant manager Lauren Fisher says the Cup's potential shift abroad is an embarrassing move by Team New Zealand that'll cost Auckland and New Zealand dearly.
It should be, and for us to enjoy it, you know, and it's just up to the highest bidder, really.
So what do the fans think of Team New Zealand's decision to possibly turn its back on Auckland?
Terrible! Awful.
Why?
I think we've supported them like through last time when it was really hard times. We supported them, we gave tax money, and also we really enjoyed it as well, and I think we deserve to have it here.
Oh, my thoughts, it's awesome to, you know, just to share the cup around the world, really, at the end of the day.
Sad, but it's a commercial reality, isn't it? It's a multi-million-dollar thing that has to be kept alive.
Ideally, if they can stay, that's very good. I think it brought a lot of atmospheres.
I would think it would be a great pity, and especially actually in the current situation of the pandemic. I think that people will be very disappointed.
One fan who's more ticked off than most is Phil Goff, the Auckland Mayor, today declaring he won't bother getting up in the middle of the night, slipping his red socks on and tuning in.
If it's going to be in the Northern Hemisphere at 3 o'clock in the morning, probably I and most other New Zealanders won't be watching that, but there'll be a few keen fans that will.
Mr Goff claims Team New Zealand wanted the government and council to double its joint offer, which would have put the public's contribution up around $200 million to host the America's Cup in Auckland. Auckland Council already invested $113 million in infrastructure for this year's America's Cup.
I don't think the Auckland ratepayers wanted to see our council splash out tens of millions of dollars for a hosting agreement. In fact, in the original race, we deliberately didn't invest in the hosting agreement. We invested in the infrastructure, which of course is still there and we can use.
Mr Goff says he and most New Zealanders assumed the team would defend the Cup in Auckland, which has been the case with the syndicate's previous defences. So he was surprised to hear, prior to the 36th America's Cup's conclusion, that Team New Zealand was already tacking towards taking the regatta offshore.
I've always accepted the word of Team New Zealand that they operated in good faith in negotiating through this period of time, but clearly they were looking overseas at an earlier date because you all reported that in the media.
Meanwhile, America's Cup Minister Stuart Nash says the joint government-Auckland Council offer remains on the table, but he says there's no more money.
If no one can offer them what we have offered them, then they come back here, and if we, if something has to go back to Cabinet, then it will.
And negotiate it will, though the end of the exclusive negotiation period does not end all hope of an Auckland-based regatta, according to a PR statement from Team New Zealand. In the same statement, Grant Dalton says no matter where the syndicate is, it'll always be Team New Zealand. But if today's anything to go by, plenty of Kiwis disagree.
It is almost 13 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron Commodore Aaron Young says the America's Cup is about billionaires and money. He spoke to me in between meetings after the government offer was rejected.
Well, obviously we're disappointed that at this stage it can't be in New Zealand. Now there's alternatives being looked at.
Why can't it be in New Zealand?
Well, at the moment there's no deal, as we've all read this morning.
When you say there's no deal at the moment, what do you mean?
Well, there's been no agreed terms between Team New Zealand and the government and council to ensure that we can have an event here in a few years.
So where does the offer fall short?
Look, right at the moment the details are still being worked through and there's a lot to work through. But yeah, as I say today, unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to look at various options offshore.
First thing, the government's put some details out there, basically a deal around $100 million in kind and cash. Why is that not enough? How much do you need to race and win an America's Cup?
I can't comment on that right now. It's quite detailed, unfortunately.
But people will be wondering, Aaron, because the government's laid out the basic details of what it's offered to keep this cup here. I'm just wondering if that's not enough, what's needed?
Sorry. I can't talk about this today. Right, sorry.
Why is today the problem, seeing as it's in the public domain?
It's because we've literally had about 2 hours to think about what is the next step.
Okay, so if we put the next steps to one side, the government says it was notified last night that it was no dice with this deal. So who made the decision that it wasn't going to be a goer with what the government was offering? Did Team New Zealand make that on their own? Does the Yacht Squadron, you guys get a vote in that, or who called it?
All the decisions made around what has happened are made in a collaborative manner between team and club.
So does that take a formal process? Do you have a show of hands, or do you talk it out and get consensus? How did it work?
We had a members update last evening, and we as a board within the Yacht Squadron has a board just as most businesses do, and that board is entrusted with making decisions on behalf of an organisation.
So did the board vote against taking the government deal?
No, as I say, we agree with, we have an agreement with Team New Zealand and we work together to decide what the best outcome is for the event and our future defence.
Okay, help me out here, Aaron. I'm just trying to understand how the decision was reached to reject that offer from the government. So did the Yacht Squadron play an active role in that?
All I'd like to say is one thing, and that is obviously we're disappointed that this event at this stage is not going to be hosted in New Zealand. The second thing is it's not over. There's still, a potential chance that this could end up here. And finally, I guess, it's not what anybody wished or planned.
So how could it stay here? Do you mean by a sponsorship deal, or you're hoping to make more headway with the government?
Oh, look, it's probably private money, to be fair.
And do you think there's that kind?
In my opinion. Do
you think there's that kind of money sloshing around?
Well, there's money in the world, isn't there, at the moment? There's plenty of money in the world, but, as we said last night, it's not, unfortunately, coming to an America's Cup event right now.
How much interest is there offshore? I mean, how many people are queuing up to potentially get this if they could?
Well, the America's Cup's always been about billionaires, and it's always been about money. So I don't really see that changing in the short-term future.
So is Cork a viable option, do you reckon?
Who knows?
What's your gut feeling?
Look, there's a lot of options to work through, and we don't know where we're at the moment, other than we'd still love this event to be in New Zealand. It's just all too soon.
Okay, but can you just clarify one thing for me before you go, Aaron? Because the public has got a lot invested in this, literally and figuratively, right? I'm just trying to clarify who made the call that the government offer was not one that you could run with. So you say that the board at the Yacht Squadron was involved, and obviously you had conversations with Team New Zealand. Was there a vote? Who made the final call? Did Grant Dalton call it?
No, I'm not going to comment.
Why not?
Because I think that's sort of a private matter at the moment. The actual exclusive period with the government really is still open for another day or so. So it's
well, the government has said today in its statement that the expiration date for the deal it offered you is today, right? So can you explain that to me, or you just don't want to? I mean,
look, right now is not a great time to be talking about it. We've just heard what we've heard. Everyone's just heard the government view, and I'm a patriotic New Zealand like the next person. We'd love to see it happen.
Aaron,
is it all over? No, it's not. Is it likely? Probably not.
And that was Aaron Young, the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron Commodore there. Ho mai o whakaro, we're keen for your feedback. Nō reira anei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. We want to hear from you on the America's Cup. What do you think about Team New Zealand turning down the government's coin? Are you sad to see the Cup potentially head offshore? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Still to come on the programme, campaigner Mike King returns his Queen's honour over failings in the mental health system. Thousands of farmers flocked to the Fieldays, first day today, in the Southern Hemisphere's largest agricultural event. The event was cancelled because of COVID last year, and so expectations are high for more than 1,000 exhibitors who are back to put their wares on display. Among them are vehicle dealers selling the traditional farm vehicles, the ute, making hay while the sun shines before the government's EV policy comes into force. Amy Williams filed this report from Fieldays.
That's the sound of a brand new ute being sold at Fieldays. It was sold to Thames farmer and businessman Peter Fullerton Smith.
For us, we know that we're going to turn this vehicle over pretty quickly anyway, so then because we do high Ks, so in 3 or 4 years' time, it'll be time to buy a new vehicle again, and so by then maybe the EV market for utes is improved or not, I don't know.
Fieldays is big business for the agriculture community. The last time the event was held at Mystery Creek near Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, it generated $500 million in sales for New Zealand businesses. Some of the big ticket items are utes, and with the recent policy announcement, farmers are expecting to pay fees when they buy new fossil fuel vehicles for their farms. Dairy Flat farmer Dave Taylor says there are no electric vehicles that can take the load he needs to tow, including a pack of farm dogs.
We're always towing trailers, portable yards, horse floats, other vehicles, quads, dogs, dog boxes, crates, hay, all sorts.
Richard Wason travelled to Fieldays from Tiano and bought a new ute that is due to arrive in August. He says electric vehicles are not up to spec for his needs.
The fact is this Volkswagen I'm looking at now goes up $6,000 in January. It goes up just to pay for a battery car, which we will not be able to use because we're too far away from any city. So the battery car is no good to us.
From July this year, people buying new electric vehicles could get a rebate from the government. The scheme will be funded through levies on new high-emissions vehicles from next year. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern visited Fieldays today. She says there are alternative vehicles that won't attract fees that manufacturers are promoting as being in the pipeline.
None of this applies to existing vehicles in country. Those in the second-hand market, those already here, it's only new and new imports, so there are options available to avoid the fees regime.
So exactly when will electric vehicles suitable for heavy-duty farm work arrive in the country? General Motors spokesperson Ed Finn says it's too early to speculate.
Unfortunately, the vehicles we have in our portfolio at the moment don't qualify for any rebates, that people have just sort of been accepting of the fact that they won't qualify for rebates.
Isuzu spokesperson Kimberly Waters says there's nothing in the pipeline just yet.
From an Isuzu Utes perspective, as far as where there's nothing in the pipeline. Obviously, in terms of what we're aware of here in New Zealand. I guess we just got to continue to watch the space.
She says there has been a spike in interest in Hyundai's electric vehicles online, but not sales. People are biding their time for the July rebate. Farmer Dave Taylor says the fee is unfair given there are unlikely to be electric utes available before it kicks in. He said he would consider buying an electric or hybrid ute.
Yeah, as long as they had the power and could do the job and at a reasonable price too. They can compare with what we've got now. But at this stage there's nothing.
For now, it's a waiting game.
Return to sender. High-profile mental health campaigner Mike King got emotional as he handed back his Order of Merit medal today. He reckons the government's mental health funding efforts have failed and no one in power is listening. More than 100 people joined him on a hikoi to Parliament today, including our reporter Tom Kitchen and cameraman Dom Thomas.
Emotions running high from Te Papa to Parliament today. Mike King in tears as he thanked supporters.
I just thank you for coming. Thank you for coming and thank you for honouring this silence, And I just want you to know that there are people out there like me. We care, we're hearing. And
he tried to explain his reasons for returning the honour.
Everyone's asking me, how I feel about giving the medal back. I feel nothing about giving the medal back, but I feel just a profound sense of sadness that no one's listening. It's not fair.
Then, with his wife and daughter in tow, he handed his medal to Michael Webster, the Secretary and Registrar of the New Zealand Order of Merit.
There it is, brother. Everything's in there.
Thank you for bringing it back, Mike. And look, I'd just like to acknowledge that the reasons why you got this stand, of course. Your service to the country was recognised by the Queen, and that's what this was. And I appreciate and acknowledge and understand and respect what you do.
Thank you, my brother. Have a good day.
Some of the people who joined the hikoi spoke of their own challenges. Alan Davidson lost his daughter as she struggled with mental health.
We lost a daughter 4.5 years ago, and I was just talking to some people that I know coming up here today. They lost a son a year ago, and I just said to them, I wish I could tell you it got easier, but here I am. They're a year down. I'm 4.5 years down, and it can be like yesterday, and there's always triggers.
Many hugged King as he handed back his medal. Mr. Davidson describes it as hugging an icon.
It was kind of hard to let go, and I think he found the same. It's just, obviously we've both been there, and yeah, it was, mate. It was, it must be like hugging Richie McCaw, but at a different level, mate.
Mr. King argues the government's $1 billion investment in mental health over the last few years has been wasted.
It hasn't improved anything. In fact, it's actually made it worse because there's an expectation from families now that the help's going to be there, and it's just not.
But Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, has a different view.
Yeah, I am confident. I think if you look at the responses the Minister's given recently, you will see that there is a lot of money going out the door, and there's been a lot of work over the last 3 to 6 months to put in place new contracts with new providers that are coming on board from July.
Acting Chief Executive of the Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission, Karen Osborne, admits the message from the community is that change isn't happening fast enough or evenly across the country. But she insists it is happening.
System transformation does take time. So when we're wanting to have new and different types of services, particularly when we prioritise development of more kaupapa Māori services, Pacific services, peer-led services, then actually working with communities to co-design those services together, what the services will look like and how they'll be provided. That engagement takes time.
We're here at Parliament and it's been an emotional journey here from Te Papa. There's been hugs, there's been tears and promises that it's not over yet.
In a statement, the Ministry of Health says it's 2 years into a large program of work to improve mental health and wellbeing in New Zealand. It says it will be a long-term program. The government has already rolled out a significant number of services around the country that are already making a difference to thousands of people every month. Now, if you were listening to that story on the radio, do go online. We'll put Tom's video package there for you to look at. Now to Dunedin, where teenager Erica Fairweather was today officially announced as a member of New Zealand's Olympic team at her school assembly. The 17-year-old Kavanagh College student will likely be the youngest member of the team. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown went back to school and has the story.
While most Year 13 students have hectic schedules to keep, Erica Fairweather is dealing with commitments a few magnitudes greater.
So usually I get up at 4:30 in the morning, which is pretty brutal, but then we're in the pool at 5 and in the water at 5:30, and then I have some breakfast, come to school, and after school it's either swimming or gym, so yeah, it's pretty busy most days.
The freestyler, who qualified last year when she was only 16, got the official news this afternoon from White Ferns player and 2008 Olympian with New Zealand's basketball team, Susie Bates.
I'm going to officially announce the athlete to the team, and representing New Zealand in swimming at the Tokyo Olympic Games, Erica Fairweather.
Erica says the raucous response meant a lot.
I am feeling on top of the world. I mean, having that assembly and all that recognition was so lovely, yeah.
And while the will it happen, won't it happen nature of this year's Olympics means preparation has been anything but seamless, Erica says, if anything, it's probably worked out in her favour.
It's definitely been interesting. I don't think it's done me any damage though. I mean, probably having the extra year and with having my young age is probably beneficial if anything.
It's been a long time since New Zealand secured a medal in the pool. In fact, Erica wasn't even born yet. Not even close.
25 metres to go. Is this going to be gold for Daniel Loader? Daniel Loader of New Zealand leads. Loader in the centre of the pool now. We're going to have an Olympic gold medal here. Daniel Loader going to win this event. Loader wins. Loader wins gold for New Zealand.
But the parallels are there. Daniel Loader was also a fresh-faced 17-year-old from Dunedin when he won a silver medal at Barcelona in 1992. 4 years later, he got double gold in Atlanta. Erica says his legacy looms large over swimmers in the south.
I mean, we swim in his pool every day. It's definitely a big icon in swimming in New Zealand as well as swimming in Dunedin. So yeah, it's a pretty hard legacy to live up to.
But Kavanagh College's principal, Kate Nicholson, says her legacy is already secure.
You'd never know she was an Olympian in the making. She is so humble and she just gets on with life and she makes it all work, which is a rare quality in somebody so young.
Her proud parents, Mark Fairweather and Emma Young, say it's no shock to them to see what she's achieved.
She goes to every session and she puts 100% in. I'm sure the coach would back that up. And she does it at school. It reflects in every part of her life. So yeah, she's a hard worker all round.
If she thinks she's going to miss a session or something because she's too busy doing something, she'll make it up the next day or that night or the next morning. So she knows what it takes and she thrives on that, I think. So, yeah, talented young girl too. Dedicated. Yeah.
And while her family and friends won't be able to support her in person, there'll be plenty of people alongside her in spirit, as well as leaping up and down in living rooms around the south when she takes to the pool in the 200 and 400 metre freestyle in Tokyo.
Wow, pretty amazing. And if you are listening to that, go online and see Timothy's report there. Some amazing pictures of some really enthusiastic schoolmates of Erica there. Some feedback from you on the America's Cup. Not so much enthusiasm in relation to that. Paul from Cambridge says, great news. The America's Cup is likely to be held overseas. Many better things to spend the money on, says Paul. Shane in Hastings says, Team New Zealand is not a thing. Team Turncoat is an embarrassment and shows it's just a business. Let them go. They they have lost the support of the nation, as well as never getting a cent of taxpayer money again. And this one, interesting, pitting the cyclists against the yachters. I've got a great idea, they say. Scrap the cycle path and offer Team New Zealand $200 million, a real discount. Kia ora e te iwi e haere ake nei I a checkpoint. A mystery delivery of bones left on the steps of Russell Museum has experts baffled. The country's only oil refinery could turn to making biofuels. And is it graffiti or racism? The dispute over rubbish signs in Te Reo Māori. Homai o whakaro. Do send us your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme so far this evening. Text us 2101 and tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now with Susanna.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the government had to weigh up the benefits to taxpayers when considering its bid to keep the America's Cup in New Zealand. Team New Zealand has rejected the almost $100 million offer from the Crown and Auckland Council, making it likely the next Cup will be held overseas. Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron Commodore Aaron Young says it is disappointing that the next race will not be held here and alternatives are now being looked at. He told Checkpoint the America's Cup has always been about billionaires and always about money, and he doesn't see that changing in the short-term future. Health officials are preparing advice on whether people vaccinated for COVID-19 should be allowed to skip a stay in managed isolation when arriving in New Zealand. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says a range of factors are being considered, including the date a person was vaccinated and from what country they came from. He says there may also be conditions such as pre-departure testing. 2 people have been found dead at a house in Pukekohe. Emergency services were called just after 3 this afternoon after reports of a sudden death. The police say they're now trying to piece together what's happened. Mental health advocate and entertainment personality Mike King handed back his New Zealand Order of Merit at Parliament today. He received the honour in 2019 for services to mental health awareness and suicide prevention. But now he says the funding isn't working as it should. A student with moderate injuries has been taken to hospital following an inter-school rugby match in Dunedin. RNZ understands it was during the first 15s match between Southland Boys High and Kings High on the latter school's grounds at roughly 2:30 this afternoon. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei, ko Nona Peltier, because it's business o'clock, isn't it, Nona?
It is.
Okay, Reserve Bank. They're getting another tool to try and cool the housing market. What is this tool?
It's a debt serviceability tool. Well, it's basically otherwise known as debt-to-income ratio restrictions. So basically it means that if, for example, they set the number at 5, it meant that if you earned $100,000, the most you could borrow would be $500,000, $500,000.
Right, so 5 times your income.
That's right, if that's the number they decide on. Yeah, it's for example. And at this stage, they're still working through all the detail, but they have an agreement from the government in principle to go ahead with this. Now, they're suggesting that it will have more of an impact on investors than first home buyers. So if you're an investor and say you made $100,000, but you've got, 3 properties and mortgages of $1.5 million, if the number was 5 and your mortgages is $1.5 million, you would fall short if your income was only $100,000.
Yeah, but also, if you're getting income from those houses, one assumes that is added into the equation as well. So it's not as simple as it may be initially seems.
And who's to say whether or not that income would be included? Because, rental income can be fickle. Sometimes you have a renter and sometimes you don't. Sometimes your property's vacated and you have to find somebody. So it's not as simple, straightforward, this is how it's going to be. And I think it's something that the Reserve Bank will be working on through the rest of this year.
Yeah, so have they given a time indication?
Not really, but I mean, there'll be a period of consultation, the usual, which you'd expect. Yeah.
So stand by. Okay, now for blast off. Rocket Lab.
Yeah, Rocket.
Okay. So Rocket Lab's going to Mars.
That's right. Mission to Mars. Mission to Mars. How exciting.
How does that work? What's the plan?
Well, they've done a deal with NASA. Now, this is not the first arrangement they've had with NASA, but this one is a decision will be finally decided at the end of this year. But the idea is they would take a couple of their rockets and load them on top of a larger NASA rocket and then head off to space in an 11-month mission and then set their rockets off at that point to do a study on the atmosphere.
So they're basically hitching a ride on a bigger rocket.
That's right. But they're saying that this is the kind of the future, because it's compact, it's less expensive and that sort of thing. And they're also talking to NASA about a mission to Venus as well. That's a private mission. They're actually looking at NASA to put a satellite into orbit around the moon later this year as well. 2023.
Did they say why you'd want to go to Venus? Or
well, this was
what
a
the mission
private
is? Yeah,
vision.
okay.
This is as well as a private mission to Venus. I don't know what the private mission to Venus is, but it would be exciting, I'm sure, to be involved in this this project. Now, one of the things about this particular company is it's planning to list on the U.S. market NASDAQ sometime over perhaps this year. What does it say? Yeah, later this year maybe. It's going to take some time. But the company's doing really well and they're getting a lot of deals. I mean, NASA's a pretty cool partner to have if you're in the rocket business.
Yeah, and interesting that there's all this talk about tourism in space. Would you go if you got a free ticket, Nona?
No, not me. I don't think so.
That didn't take you long to answer.
It's just taken too long, 11 months. I'd rather do something else.
Okay, let's talk about the markets then. Let's take a trot around the numbers.
Right, okay. Well, I told you earlier this week that the U.S. Federal Reserve is meeting, so their meeting's about to wrap up overnight. The market's a bit tentative ahead of that because no one knows exactly where things are going to go. So there'll be a lot of interest in what the Federal Reserve chair says. At the moment, you had a big gain yesterday with our NZX Top 50 Index. Well, today we've taken it all off again. So we were up about 1% yesterday. Today, down nearly 1%. A drop of 115 points to 12,582. That just goes to show you how really the market's working these days. A bit fickle, really. Doesn't know which way to go. And the dollar is steady, 71.4 US cents, and that's where it's been stuck for ages. 92.8 Australian and 50.7 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Balsier with Business News. Talks are underway with the country's only oil refinery about potentially using the facility to make biofuels. The Marsden Point refinery near Whangarei looks likely to be scaled back to an import-only terminal next year, with hundreds of jobs to be cut. But workers say that would be a huge waste, with many staff keen to use their skills to make alternative fuels as part of Aotearoa's carbon zero goals. Nita Blake-Person reports.
A much-needed switch from dirty old petrol to greener biofuels was raised again in last week's Climate Commission report, a big boost for staff at Refining New Zealand.
A lot of the people working there have been innovative and can work on the technology to change out of hydrocarbon to alternates like hydrogen, biofuels, you name it.
Aaron Holroyd has worked at the refinery for 35 years and is the first union delegate there. His job will almost certainly go under proposed plans to transform Marsden Point into an import-only terminal, along with hundreds of others. But as the country gears up for a shift to greener energies, he says the loss of that knowledge and the facility would be a huge shame.
We've spent $750 million on equipment for the last 15 years, so we've actually upgraded the refinery. It's not an old antique refinery like some of the Australian ones which have shut. So it's actually quite a modern refinery, and we'll still need that hydrocarbon technology for the next 20 years while we transition.
Jonathan Pooch works with carbon and engineering consultancy DETA and agrees the refinery is a critical asset.
Well, the Climate Change Commission advice was that by 2035, at least 5% of liquid fuel would come from biofuels, simplistically. Now, that is a huge amount of volume that is currently not generated today. Now, there's a real opportunity for New Zealand, rather than importing biofuels from overseas, we have an opportunity locally to make our own fuel and use it ourselves.
He says the staff are too important to lose.
If we look at one of the key constraints, in my view, to New Zealand achieving net zero is skilled people who can help deliver the transition we need. And any step that takes us away from that is a backward step in my view.
But some of those workers are already headed elsewhere, with Holroyd saying there are no guarantees about the refinery's future.
We're losing a few to Australia. With the mining and mineral market and the oil and gas industry, after a lull, it's picking up in Australia, so they're looking for work there.
First Union has written to Climate Change Minister James Shaw about the issue. It says there is significant potential to repurpose Marsden Point as a key regional energy generation and distribution hub, and it wants to know what the government's doing about it all. Aaron Holroyd says they can't afford to kick the can down the road.
Refineries that are shut worldwide, they never start up again. Because the moment you leave it, the moment you stop doing maintenance on all that technology out there, it just rusts and goes to pieces. You know, it's equipment that you need to work on 24/7, 365 days of the year. If you leave it, even for 1 or 2 years, you'll never revive it.
In a statement, the Energy Minister, Megan Wood, says what happens at Marsden Point is a decision for Refining New Zealand, and future opportunities are best developed by them and with locals. But Woods did say she was particularly interested in the role the refinery could play in the transition to a net zero economy, such as potential biofuels production. Refining New Zealand said it was in active discussions with the government on the issue and was conscious that the loss of skills may impact local capability to produce biofuels and sustainable aviation fuels in the future. Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai is part of a working group looking at the refinery's future and says biofuel production could be a big opportunity.
There are many factors that bode well for the development of the site at Marsden Point, and we've got interest in renewable energy for the site. It's just a matter of, it is a timing factor because obviously plans can't be put into place until decisions are made. But I'm very hopeful for the future.
A shareholder meeting to decide Marsden Point's fate will be held later this year.
This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Still to come on the programme, signs in Te Reo Māori prompt a graffiti complaint to the council. Bones dropped off on the doorstep of the Russell Museum are baffling staff, archaeologists and iwi. They're also concerned the remains found on Saturday are human. Sam Orley reports.
An unexpected delivery welcomed Russell Museum manager and curator Fiona Moore on Saturday.
When I came into work to open up the museum, I found a small deposit of bones on the doorstep. I was perplexed but also disappointed that someone had actually deposited the bones without any identification.
She deals with old things every day, but these additions were rather morbid.
There were fragments of bones, whereas if it was sort of like a full human skull or something like that, that would have been more disconcerting.
Most of the bones were unidentifiable, but she thought one had human resemblances and a physio agreed. A scientific identification process is now underway, but Fiona Moore and tangata whenua want suspected ko iwi treated with more respect in future. Kororareka Marae Chair Te Reo says old bones that appear human should not be disturbed.
It's a bit disheartening to think that somebody has just picked up the bones. We don't know how they've been uncovered. They've put them in a box and then they've delivered them to the museum anonymously.
She says protocols must be observed, including karakia and kaumātua, before any human remains are moved.
It's about the tikanga. So I was surprised that somebody had just randomly dropped them off, but I thought it's somebody probably unaware of what to do.
Deb Rewiri is hoping the person who found the bones will come forward to help identify where they came from and if there are more nearby. Heritage New Zealand is wary that ko iwi and animal bones will continue to emerge from ancient Māori settlements and more recent European additions in Te Tai Tokero. Climate change is also expected to worsen coastal erosion. Heritage New Zealand senior archaeologist Dr. James Robinson says in the past year, 2 burials have been unearthed on beaches in Northland.
One on Urapukapuka and one on Ōtaki Bay, and within the last 2 years, another one at Ōtaki Bay was found in very close proximity. But the storms in the recent 2 weeks, I was informed by the police that ko iwi had been found at Elliott's Beach, and that's not unusual, as there's been a number of storm events over the last 10, 15 years which have uncovered bones there.
Dr Robinson says anyone who finds possible ko iwi should not disturb them. They should note the place and appearance of the site and immediately contact police, Heritage New Zealand or the closest marae.
It is 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki i ngā pitapita kōrero after the news at 6. Members of the Muslim community detailed the abuse they've received from fellow New Zealanders. To the US now, where the first state to lock down has lifted most of its COVID-19 restrictions. California's reopening means bars can be full, masks aren't needed at theme parks, and fans can sit next to each other at sports games. And as CNN's Nick Watt reports, on the country's east coast, New Yorkers are living with more freedom too.
The countdown to 8 a.m. Langer's Deli prepping to open its dining room for the first time in more than 15 months.
We'll be able to put a smile on all my employees' faces and all of my customers' faces.
I've been off since March of 2020.
Across California, no more capacity limits or social distancing in restaurants and stores. And most places, no mask required for the vaccinated. This, the most populous state in the nation, was the first to tell its nearly 40 million people to stay home. And that was more than 450 days ago.
We need to bend the curve in the state of California.
A grim-faced governor then, grinning now at Universal Studios.
We are here, June 15th, to turn the page and move beyond wearing these masks.
And Disneyland, once again welcoming visitors from out of state. Over in New York State,
this is a momentous day.
70% of adults have now had at least one dose.
It means that we can now return to life as we know it.
As of lunchtime, New York State COVID restrictions are no more. The virus has now killed more than 600,000 in America. More will die, but how many? We watched the Delta variant ravage India. The CDC just changed it from variant of interest to variant of concern.
I'm extremely worried because the Delta variant is so aggressive in terms of transmission. Anyone who's unvaccinated right now is at very, very high risk, especially in the South this summer.
Roughly 55% of adults in America are now fully vaccinated, but the rollout is slowing and it's uneven geographically, demographically.
If you have more than roughly half of the population vaccinated, it's not as if half the people you know are vaccinated and half aren't. Either just about everybody you know is vaccinated or everybody you know isn't.
Let's go to some feedback now, because lots of it is coming in about the America's Cup. This person says, I'm appalled at the arrogance and sense of entitlement displayed by Team New Zealand. Gary's got in touch to say, instead of wasting $600 million on a cycle bridge, why not put it into the America's Cup and the nurses' pay increase? Now, Gary's not the only one who reckons that the nurses should get the money too. Someone else has texted us about that. Oh, here it is. Far more important to pay nurses 17% than give heaps of dosh to the America's Cup, this listener says. Let the rich support their own sport. And Jonathan from Wellington has also got strong opinions on this. Good riddance, Team New Zealand. And greed. Sports events never make money for the host city. Oh well, there's $100 million the government and council can now pump into the walking and cycling bridge over the harbour, a much more worthy cause. Interesting how you're picking a team. You're either on the water or you're on the cycle bridge, it seems. Robin says, I'm thrilled the America's Cup is leaving New Zealand. The benefits are less than the costs. I would rather see the money spent on housing, poverty and health. And just one more here, pure greed. Take the name and the fern off the boat, that listener says. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. In a few hours, President Biden will meet his Russian adversary, Vladimir Putin, for their first hotly anticipated summit. And with US-Russian relations at their lowest point since the Cold War, it could be a difficult conversation. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg reports from Geneva.
Switzerland and summits. They go together like cuckoos and clocks.
The Russians had come out of their Moscow shell to sit round the table with the Americans, with whom not so long ago they were not the best of friends.
That was Geneva, 1955. 30 years later, same place.
General Secretary Gorbachev and I have held comprehensive discussions
covering all elements of our relationship.
When Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev in Geneva, they clicked and the Cold War began to thaw. That didn't last.
President Biden thinks Vladimir Putin is a killer, and the Russian
NATO is calling on Russia to withdraw its troops from the border with Ukraine. 80,000 Russian soldiers, heavily armed.
President Biden announced a series of tough new sanctions against Russia today.
US-Russian relations are back in the deep freeze. So it's back to Geneva. Joe Biden says he wants a stable, predictable relationship with Moscow. Question is that what Vladimir Putin wants?
He actually does not want that. Vladimir Putin needs the United States as an enemy.
Michael McFaul was US ambassador to Russia under President Obama. He's not expecting Geneva to transform Putin into Gorbachev 2.0.
Putin is not Gorbachev, and let me be clear about that. Gorbachev had a strategy to pursue political and economic reforms internally inside the Soviet Union and to join the West abroad. That was his strategy. It didn't work, of course, but that was his mindset going into Geneva. Putin has the exact opposite. Putin is rolling back democracy and human rights at home and is seeking to thwart the liberal international order. He doesn't want to join it. He wants to see its destruction.
If that's the case, why is Vladimir Putin even coming to Geneva?
Well,
Mr. Putin says he's keen to cooperate with the US on common interests, strategic stability, arms control, climate change. But broadcaster Yevgenia Albats believes that what the Kremlin leader really wants is something Joe Biden will be unwilling to give.
I think that Vladimir Putin wants the West to agree with his right to do whatever he wants inside Russia, kill whoever he wants, put in prison whoever he wants, do whatever he wants in Belarus, inside Ukraine, and West should stay away. It's really important to make clear to Putin that you're not going to betray your values and your principles.
Moscow is in no mood to be lectured by Joe Biden on Western values or human rights. Vyacheslav Nikonov is a Russian MP.
We do not consider nowadays America to be a democracy. You know, after Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, after so many wars America fought all over the world, and of course racial discriminations and many, many other things. Americans think they have some moral superiority, but we don't think so.
Russia still views the United States as a Cold War rival, but America today views Russia as a distraction.
Signs in Te Reo, in a Kapiti Coast town, have prompted a graffiti complaint to the council. But the Ōtaki artist behind them says the real problem is racism. Hohepa Thompson's trying to encourage the everyday use of Te Reo Māori, so he put a label reading rāpihi, or rubbish, on the council bin outside his store. But the sticker kept disappearing, and then the bin disappeared too.
So it's a part of a kind of community initiative we're running where we're trying to get more Te Reo into kind of mainstream little spaces. And I noticed someone was taking the stickers off over a kind of 3-week period, and then I had my sneaking suspicions who it was, so I kind of baited them by completely covering the sticker outside the bin from our shop, and then I watched as I saw them rip it off. And then the council had complaints that they were offended by them. But the biggest thing that kind of gets me is that they're offended by these stickers and our culture, but they're happy to kind of sell taonga Māori from their store. So they don't want anything to do with the initiative, but they're kind of happy to profit from our culture.
Hohepa, just to go back a step, can you describe the stickers to me? Tell me what they said and where you initially put them.
The sticker says rāpihi, which is Māori for rubbish, and there was just one put on each bin as you walked up the roads. So,
and when you put them there, would they disappear the next day, the stickers?
Yeah, one of them, the one outside our shop, it was constantly disappearing. And being ripped off, and I kind of noticed what was happening, and So I replaced it with a more of a vinyl sticker, which is really hard to get off. And then that's when I noticed there were like kind of scrape marks and really trying to get it off. So, you know, casual racism has kind of come out as well. So, yeah, it's I've kind of put my foot down and said that we're not going to tolerate it anymore.
So the council has said what to you about the stickers?
I've not heard anything from council about it. I just saw that the bin had been taken away and replaced with a new one.
So what do you think? What do you think the real issue is here then?
I think the issue is blatant racism. It's just been happening for too long.
Well, can you even begin to try and explain what might be offensive about the sticker?
No, it's like the most there's nothing to be offended by it whatsoever. It's so tiny. I've seen their complaint was that they're offended by it and think it was an eyesore. And the woman has approached me before, saying, "Why do you have to keep putting your Māori stuff up everywhere?" And as an artist who puts murals all around the town, and you know, for instance, just about to start a big one at the local school that says Manaakitanga at the local college. It's just like, this is kind of my job and this is actually what I do.
So how has this left you feeling? The disappearing labels and then the bin going?
Yeah, it was quite taxing last week. You know, you kind of... I mean, I've grown up with this type of behaviour before, but to kind of see it and catch it out, you know, yeah, it's hard to take, but you know, some people are pretty ignorant out there, so I don't think they quite realise the actions that they're doing are racist, and calling it out is something that was really hard to do, but I'm pretty glad that I did it, to be honest.
Hohepa Thompson and Kapiti Coast District Council has confirmed a bin was removed due to a graffiti complaint, but following an investigation, it accepts the sticker was trying to further promote Ōtaki as a bilingual town. The council says it fully supports the use of Te Reo Māori in its work and is open to exploring opportunities to collaborate with the creative sector to promote the use of Te Reo Māori. Let us know your thoughts on that one. Text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Let's go to some more cup feedback because there's lots of it coming in. Mike from Auckland says a full America's Cup with multiple teams brings hundreds of millions of foreign exchange into the country, just as subsidised movie productions do. Failure by government to support Team New Zealand is short-sighted and damaging. But it only works, Mike, if our borders are open, if we want to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars, doesn't it? And I don't know, will they be open? And this person, Lynn's got in touch to say it's not just the money, it's the closed borders. Team New Zealand can't guarantee sponsors and competitors entry to this country. Another listener reckons far more important to pay nurses. That's about the third one we've had on that. Interesting. And also someone has got in touch to say, I've always supported Team New Zealand and felt all Kiwis were part of the team. Our taxpayer money helped the team achieve that. I do not feel that anymore. They have lost my support and I suspect I am not on my own. Go off and find some money, but do not use New Zealand in the team name. You're not our team anymore, that listener says. And another one says, loyalty is not a one-way street. At their own admission, there is money out there, so let Team New Zealand find it and fund themselves.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei ātau at DNA. The Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron's Commodore says he is disappointed the 37th America's Cup may be held overseas. Team New Zealand has rejected an offer of $99 million from the council and government to host the next Cup regatta in Auckland. Aaron Young's told Checkpoint that realistically it's a sport built on cash.
Well, the America's Cup's always been about billionaires and it's always been about money. So I don't really see that changing in the short-term future.
Team New Zealand are now free to negotiate with other countries and commercial interests about the next regatta. The latest survey data provided to the Health Ministry suggests 80% of adults say they're likely to get a vaccine or have already been vaccinated. That's up from 69% in March and 77% in April. The Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, says a core group of about 12% of people say they won't receive a jab.
Our challenge, and one we're more than happy to take up, is to continue to work with those groups to ensure we answer their questions and make sure they have all the information they need to decide what's right for them.
6% of New Zealand's population are fully vaccinated as of midnight last night. An expert in online hate speech says major online platforms have been embarrassed into taking action to prevent its spread. Sanjana Hatotua was speaking today at a conference on terrorism in Christchurch. His job for Ōtaki University involves trawling through thousands of online messages every day so he can get a handle on what's driving hate speech. He says events such as March 15 have shown the serious consequences of allowing it to spread unchecked, and that internet platforms are now taking action. Mr. Hatotua says if authorities want to do a better job of tackling hate speech, they also have to look at what is happening in wider society. Mental health advocate and entertainment personality Mike King has spoken of his disappointment in New Zealand's mental health system. He handed back his New Zealand Order of Merit at Parliament today. He received the honour in 2019 for services to mental health awareness and suicide prevention. But now he says the funding isn't working as it should. Over 100 supporters joined him in a hikoi from Te Papa to Parliament, but the Ministry of Health and Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission say although change is on its way, it takes time. Thousands of farmers flocked to the first day of Fieldays today, the Southern Hemisphere's largest agricultural event. Among the exhibitors are vehicle dealers selling the traditional farm vehicles, the ute, before the government's EV policy comes into force. Amy Williams reports from Fieldays.
Fieldays is big business for the agriculture community. In 2019, the last time the event was held at Mystery Creek near Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, it generated $500 million in sales for New Zealand businesses. Some of the big ticket items are utes, and with the recent policy announcement, farmers are expecting to pay fees when they buy new fossil fuel vehicles for their farms. Two farmers RNZ spoke to had just bought new utes ahead of the policy change.
A helicopter crash on Saturday, which has left 3 people with serious injuries, happened after the aircraft's engine stopped just after takeoff. 4 people were on board the Robinson helicopter, including a newlywed couple. The owner of the helicopter, Wyndon Aviation, says the investigation into what happened is still in its early stages, but it has established that the engine suffered a total power loss shortly after takeoff. Wyndon Aviation spokesperson Mike Fransham says that is a very rare occurrence, and investigations so far have been unable to provide an explanation of why it happened. The Israeli military has struck targets in Gaza, the first airstrikes since a ceasefire went into effect nearly 1 month ago. Israel says it was retaliating for incendiary balloons being sent into the country by Hamas. The BBC's Rushdie Abdoualouf has more.
The violent sounds of explosion were enough to instill fear of renewed fighting. As Israeli warplanes attacked 2 Hamas military sites, it follows a day of angry protest across the Gaza Strip and near the border with Israel. The Israeli military said it was responding to the firing of incendiary balloons from the Gaza Strip, causing fires on farms in southern Israel. Hamas condemned the Israeli strikes as Zionist aggression, but it did not address the possibility of firing rockets, perhaps because of Egypt's tenuous effort to strengthen the ceasefire.
It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The Warriors fullback Reece Walsh says he hasn't heard from Queensland Rugby League selectors amid talk of a shock State of Origin call-up. After a 50-6 thrashing at the hands of New South Wales in Game 1, Maroons legends Wally Lewis and Cooper Cronk are among those endorsing calls for the 18-year-old selection. Walsh says he'd relish an Origin call-up, but the Warriors assistant coach Justin Morgan says the club would be against the move.
No disrespect to Reece, I think Origin's a little bit beyond him at the moment. He's still wrapping his head around the NRL. Will he play Origin at some point? I would say at some point, but 2021 is a tad early for him to be thrown into that cauldron.
New Zealand's leading medal hope in the pool at the Tokyo Olympics is confident a lack of international competition won't hamper his chances. Wellington's Lewis Clearbert headlines the 7-strong swim team are named for Tokyo, all of whom will be competing at their first games. COVID has meant no international competition for the past year and a half, but Clearbert, a bronze medal winner at the 2019 World Champs, is unfazed.
99% of my training and what I do is based, here in New Zealand, and international competition definitely helps. But ultimately, when we get to the Olympics, everyone's going to be in the same boat. No one else is going to have international competition, so we'll be pretty well prepared.
Feuding American golfers Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka have been kept apart in the draw for the opening rounds of the US Open, which starts on Friday. Koepka recently posted a video on social media offering free beer to fans ejected from an event for heckling DeChambeau. That's the news.
In sports, you control your own destiny, but in politics, it's more a numbers and a group game. So you do a bit of lobbying here and there. It's a different game, if you like to call it.
This week on Champions of the Pacific, from powerful lifting to wielding political power, we meet Nauru's first Olympian and former president. Check us out at rnz.co.nz under the Pacific tab, or download us wherever you get your podcasts. Or listen in to Champions of the Pacific Wednesday nights at 9:40 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, partly cloudy, a few showers. Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods, a few showers until evening and again tomorrow morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa mainly fine. Isolated showers for Wairarapa spreading elsewhere tomorrow afternoon and evening. Waikato to Wellington, including central high country, also Marlborough and Nelson. Cloudy periods and occasional showers, possibly heavy in the west tonight. Widespread rain developing in Marlborough tomorrow afternoon. Bulla and Westland, a period of rain tonight, otherwise a few showers clearing southern Westland tomorrow morning. Fiordland, partly cloudy with isolated showers, clearing tomorrow morning, then becoming fine. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy. Patchy drizzle turning to rain in Southland this evening, elsewhere tomorrow. For Chatham Islands, cloudy with periods of rain, possibly thundery tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā iho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. And some breaking news, a community case of COVID-19 has been detected in Sydney. The ABC is reporting that the man visited Bondi Junction shopping centre several times in the last few days. So just to repeat that, a community case of COVID-19 has been detected in Sydney, and the infected man is believed to have visited a rather large shopping centre several times in the last few days. Back home, Team New Zealand has tacked away from a big chunk of money from the government and could be headed offshore to defend the Cup. The government's confirmed it offered up to $99 million in a package to help keep the Cup here, but that's been rejected. From tomorrow, Team New Zealand is free to negotiate with other countries interested in playing host. AUT Professor of Sailing, Mark Orams, joins us now. Well, Mark, you called it. You said the government deal was dead in the water. So what happens now?
Well, what it does do is it opens up the options for Grant Dalton and Team New Zealand to look at other venues and other arrangements. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the Cup will go entirely offshore. What it could mean is that Grant Dalton is able to come up with some creative way where either lead-up series could be held elsewhere with the final Cup series here in Auckland or vice versa. So the exclusive negotiation period ending doesn't necessarily mean hosting it in New Zealand is dead in the water, but it makes it a lot less likely.
Are we any clearer how they came to this decision and who actually made the decision to reject the government's offer?
Well, that would have been Team New Zealand's decision, but they would have had to ensure that they had the support of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron as the club that holds the America's Cup in making the decision to reject the offer from the government. Now, the basis of that rejection will be a decision from the team as to what they need to keep the team together and to have enough resource to mount a successful defence. And this is not a cheap exercise. And also, we're up against, when I say we, Team New Zealand is up against some very significant resource from the international teams that are trying to win the Cup off Team New Zealand and the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. So what Grant Dalton and the team are trying to do is to keep the team together, to stop an Alingi scenario from 2003 happening again, because we've seen that movie before and we know we don't like the ending.
But here's the thing, Mark. They're not a national team, right? They're professional sailors, and this is their job. So does it matter if the team's split up?
Well, it matters if they want to stay competitive. So you're quite right. They're not a nationally representative team. They're a professional private sailing team. But what they will be wanting to ensure they do is that they stay competitive. And that's what they're going to need resources to do, because if they don't raise enough money, they can't keep the people and the resources that they need to be competitive. So step one, if you're in any competitive sporting environment, is to try and ensure that you have the best possible chance of winning. And then you fall other things in behind that. We could potentially, the other scenario is to say, right, we're going to do a cut price kind of thing and keep it here and accept the government's offer, but we're going to lose a large majority of our team and IP, and we're probably going to end up unsuccessful in defending the Cup, and then it's gone, and it's very difficult to win back. As we learned, it took us 15 years after we lost in 2003 to get it back. So, it's a difficult scenario for Grant Dalton and the team. They know what it takes to be competitive. They haven't been able to do that in terms of what the negotiation period has produced with the New Zealand government.
We talked a bit about this last night, but I'm wondering if you've got a clearer picture in your head about what the magic number is, because we now know that it's a $99 million package that the government offered, and it's complicated because not all of that is cash monies, right? Some of it is use of facilities and all the rest of it. So what do you need as a minimum to be competitive against the big guns?
Yeah, you're quite right to make the distinction between cash and in-kind. So in-kind are things like the provision of base facilities, potential products and services that you might need, and other kind of assistance. But that doesn't pay your wages bill. It doesn't buy you carbon fibre that you need to build the boat and the mast. It doesn't buy you the sales that you need to be competitive. All those sorts of things require cash, and a lot of it. And that cash is needed not just for 1 year, but 3 or 4 years. And so that starts to add up very quickly in this kind of environment, remembering this is a team of 120 strong. And the boats, probably 2 of them, that they'll need to design and build and test for the next time, with multiple iterations of very expensive componentry. That adds up very quickly to many tens of millions of dollars. So what the team has basically made the assessment is that the amount of cash that they were offered from the New Zealand government wasn't enough to meet their needs to be competitive. The in-kind stuff is kind of, you put that aside. You're going to get that wherever you go. It's the cash that counts.
So, before you go, cork, is it really going to fly?
Oh, I would be very surprised if that one got up. I really would. That was a left field one for me when I read that. I thought, really? I mean, you never say never in this game, but I'd be very surprised if that one was where the next America's Cup was going to be hosted. I think the strongest contender is Isle of Wight and Auckland, New Zealand, and some kind of combination of that.
Great to talk to you, Mark. That's Mark Orams, who's the Professor of Sailing at AUT. Now, more on that community COVID case in Sydney. A man in his 60s has tested positive for the virus. It's the first case of community transmission in the city since May. The man visited the Bondi Junction shopping centre in the city's east several times in recent days. New South Wales Health says he has not travelled overseas in recent times. However, he works as a driver, which includes transporting international flight crew. It comes as health authorities continue to investigate 3 confirmed cases on the same floor of a quarantine hotel in the city's CBD. All 3 cases stayed in adjacent hotel rooms of the Radisson Blu Hotel. It was a crime made to go online. Words spoken at the conference in Christchurch on terrorism that today looked at the role online hate speech played in the March 15 mosque attacks. Our reporter Conan Young and cameraman Nathan McKinnon were there.
In a panel discussion called What Hate Feels Like Now, members of the Muslim community told the conference about the abuse they received from fellow New Zealanders. Alia Danzaisen from the Islamic Women's Council says while people are generally kinder to Muslims in public following the events of March 15, what they encounter online is a whole different story.
So when I walk into the store, people are friendlier. I feel a warmth that wasn't there from prior to March 15th, 2019. However, the online activity has become more vicious. The posters are more savvy, I guess, so to be able to find out who they are is more of a challenge.
She says the police are limited in the action they can take against those posting the comments, but she wants platforms such as Google, which runs YouTube, to do more. She recounted her experience trying to find out who it was that posted a video on YouTube directing threats towards her and being told she would need to take court action to get this information.
If social media companies are serious about it, you would think that something that included threats regarding rape and killing of other people in a reference to me, that would be enough for them to disclose who the actual poster had been, but it wasn't.
Sanjana Hatotua's job for Otago University involves trawling through thousands of messages left online and in social media every day so he can get a handle on what's driving hate speech.
It is exhausting, emotionally draining to look at hate, hurt and harm and incitement to violence every day.
Sanjana Hatotua says events such as March 15 have shown the serious consequences of allowing online hate to spread unchecked and that internet platforms now have been embarrassed into taking action.
And what they don't do is going to create a bad news cycle, and it seems to be the case. Cynically perhaps, but realistically that they are concerned about that. And of course, let me also very clearly say there are individuals within these corporations and companies. Facebook, for example, has a new human rights policy, the first of its kind. Twitter is very, very clear on its human rights expressions and as a foundation for the company. We're going to see a shift in tone, timbre and thrust from the companies as well.
But he says the effort cannot just be left up to online platforms and that if authorities want to do a better job of tackling the hate speech and disinformation, they first have to look at what's happening in wider society.
The digital increases in scope, scale and speed, that which is already a problem very often in societies and polity, including in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So one is that you would study the online, but as I tried to explain, it is really a reflection and refraction of what is offline.
Police Commissioner Andrew Costa also spoke at the conference and says police are now working hard on doing a much better job of responding to hate crimes.
So one of the sort of bigger pieces that was recommended in the Royal Commission report was to look at a single reporting channel for incidents of this kind. That is presently a work in progress in terms of what the options for that might look like. In the meantime, we have made available an online reporting channel, and we're working on all of the systems that ensure that that goes to the right place, whether it's inside of police, to a particular website in terms of taking down material, in terms of being able to assess people's concerns for their security. So all of that is underway, and we're working to lift the quality of that.
YouTube owners Google have been approached for comment. On its website, YouTube says it doesn't allow content that targets an individual with prolonged or malicious insults based on intrinsic attributes and asks those who find such content to report it.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A clinical study getting underway in Rotorua and Christchurch will provide valuable information on how the population responds to the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. The study aims to enrol at least 300 adult participants with a focus on Māori Pasifika adults 65 years old and older and those with comorbidities associated with increased risk of COVID. The study will assess immune responses for up to 12 months after the last vaccine dose. Sarah Jane Hopgood reports.
The study is called Ka Mātou, Ka Ora, meaning from knowledge comes well-being. It's been led by Vaccine Alliance Aotearoa New Zealand, or VANZ, and has been undertaken to inform the national COVID-19 strategy and ultimately enhance vaccine effectiveness and confidence. Malagans Institute's VANZ Clinical Director, Dr. Fran Pretty, says while the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has demonstrated efficacy and safety in clinical trials and real-world studies, it hasn't yet been studied in New Zealand.
When you study vaccines, in order to make sure that there's no safety concerns, you also look to see, are they immunogenic? Do they stimulate a good immune response or the right kind of immune response in the body? And when you're testing vaccines for development is to see, do they prevent disease or infection, actually?
Dr. Pretty says because New Zealand hasn't had a drastic COVID-19 outbreak recently, it's not possible to do studies to see if it prevents disease in the country. So, she says they're using studies done abroad.
In New Zealand, because we don't have any COVID circulating right now, we can't do the studies to see, does it prevent disease? And so we're using the international data, so we don't need to do that big study here. But we would like to confirm that the immune responses, what's responsible for protecting you, are what we would expect in New Zealanders, and see if there's any differences among groups here that may need to be addressed.
The group she's referring to include Māori, Pasifika, and adults 65 years and older. Dr. Pretty says these groups are known to have higher rates of comorbidities as well as worse outcomes with COVID.
It's important to show that the vaccine is adequately immunogenic, gives a good immune response in those groups, because those are the groups that need the protection the most. They're at higher risk for having, a hospitalization, for example.
Ministry of Health COVID-19 Pacific Response Team member Dr. Api Talimatonga says currently the uptake of vaccine is slow in South Auckland, and for Pasifika people, it's because of competing priorities.
I know that my patients in South Auckland are not sitting around waiting for an appointment to see me. They're waiting for when the car is available, the one car that is used by 5 family members, or when someone's able to drive them. So we need to be just more flexible.
Clinical immunologist Dr. Maya Buriton, who's on the Mulligan Institute's Te Urungi Māori Advisory Board, says that Aotearoa is in an enviable position due to our elimination strategy. She says this study measuring specific immune markers offers a useful alternative approach to assess the vaccine response amongst our people. Her statement has been voiced.
Māori and Pasifika have a greater burden of conditions like heart disease associated with more severe COVID-19 disease. However, even after we account for these conditions, Māori and Pasifika are still at increased risk of developing severe disease. We know there is more to learn, and this research is important to help identify and understand any differences in the immune response.
Dr. Pretty says they're confident in the vaccines and that the study is to confirm what the immune response is for each population, which then helps fine-tune the vaccine strategy moving forward.
While rumours of an illicit rendezvous have reached checkpoint all the way from Whangarei. Talk of a goose, well actually a gander to be specific, and detail is really important here. Talk that a gander has infiltrated a flock of a flock of ducks at Mere Park. He's apparently strutting himself like a dandy, resulting in a strange and new kind of crossbreed of quackers waddling about. Could this be true? Well, we weren't sure, so we don't like to leave a mystery unsolved, so we called an expert birdman, Robert Webb, from Whangarei Native Bird Recovery, and we asked him to go and investigate. What can you see, and where are you, Robert?
I'm at the wetlands at Barge Park in Whangarei. Yeah, right down the bottom there's a small little pond or lake, and all the pukakos and the ducks and all that accumulate here, and try to tell people that they're starving every day.
Can you see a randy goose anywhere around there, Robert?
No, what they are Muscovies. And the Muscovy ducks are big fellas. So people do get them muddled up with a goose. But a goose would be bigger again. But these fellas here, like the other day there was some children here with their parents, and one of the kiddies went over, and of course this Muscovy wanted to get a feed from it. And it was reaching up to the kid. Well, it was nearly as tall as what the child was.
So these are big quackers, and they're not. It's not a goose who's running around down there. Then
no, the Muscovies. What happens is people get the Muscovy ducks, because the Muscovies are probably 3, nearly 4 times bigger than the normal duck. So they're a big bird, and if people haven't had much to do with them and they see them for the first time, they sort of think, oh, they must be geese.
Right, so is this an urban legend then, that you've got a runaway goose down there that is breeding with the ducks and you've got some strange offspring trotting about?
No, what is happening is they're all Muscovies here at the moment. There's no geese here at all. They're all Muscovies. They're all Muscovy ducks, but they're huge. You know, they're big duck. But there's no geese here.
Can you see any littlies? Is there any offspring that look a bit odd or out of sorts?
Can't see any babies here, but the Muscovies are quite a wide variety of colours because of interbreeding. There's no doubt about that. There's brown ones, there's whitey coloured ones, there's black ones, motley coloured ones. So there's a whole heap of them. I took a couple of photos of them, and so it's not the first time that somebody has actually dropped a goose down here either.
Is that where people dump their unwanted bird life, is it?
Yes, because it's a wetland area and it's protected. So, like, I came down here some time ago and there was a black swan down here.
So what are the consequences of that, Robert, then, people leaving unwanted birds down there?
Well, it's a shame that they do it because the birds, you know, they just dump them and then the birds still... Well, the birds probably don't mind, but, you know, they do get harassed at times. People take their dogs for walks and that sort of thing, and they chase them. And then when the breeding season comes along, the pukakos will naturally grab any of the little ducklings they can grab or the little ducks they can grab. But at the moment, like, the breeding shouldn't be till about November.
So what do you reckon's going on then when some people think that they're I don't know, they're not ducklings because they're not pure ducks, so I don't know what you'd call them, but some people think that there's been a goose down there and that it's been breeding with the ducks. So are they just confused about what's what?
I think that's what it is. I don't believe that a goose would breed with one of the ducks or the Muscovies. I don't think that would happen. That would be like making love to a bloody steamroller.
Oh, Robert. And there we all thinking that we might have a new, I don't know, something that's a bit like a turducken that we could brew up for Christmas dinner, but apparently not. Urban legend. It is then.
I know a few of these ducks disappear, or these Muscovies disappear at times, because I know people do get them and eat them. I know that. But they're all in good nick. A lot of people come down here and they love coming down and feeding the ducks, and they bring their children down. They're not aggressive. Like if a child's got a bit of bread in its hand, you know, it'll try to grab the bread out of the kid's hand.
So, if we were just for a moment to imagine ourselves as Sherlock and Watson and we got to the bottom of this mystery, it's mistaken identity, is it, Robert?
I think so, yes, because a lot of people don't get a chance to see a Muscovy up close. Now, it's not to say that there hasn't been geese here, because in the past there were a couple of geese down here, but they were quite nasty ones, and they were relocated out to another place where there are wild geese.
Just to recap, Robert, you think that never a goose and a duck, well, there'll be no sort of romantic liaison between those two?
I wouldn't think so, no, definitely not. No, I've never heard of it. But if they keep multiplying, I'll probably open up a Kentucky duck outlet down here soon to make some funds for the centre.
And that was our Raki Kaumatua, Robert Webb, expert in ducks and other birds. Some of your feedback on the America's Cup before we head off. This person, Lou from Christchurch, says, if the America's Cup is about billionaires, why the heck are we funding them at all, especially when we have hungry children to care for? And someone else says, why do we care about billionaire man sailors? Why don't we care about poverty, mouldy schools, striking nurses and climate change? The list goes on, they say. Let's get real. Well, first up, we'll be with you from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning and more on this topic. The Sports Minister and Money Man, Grant Robertson, will be talking to Nathan Rārere about whether Team New Zealand is being a little bit too greedy. Kei te hoki mai anō a pōpō whānau, pō Mārie. We'll be back same time tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron's Commodore says he is disappointed the 37th America's Cup may be held overseas, but realistically it's a sport built on cash. Health officials are preparing advice on whether people vaccinated for COVID-19 should be allowed to skip a stay in managed isolation when arriving here. An expert in online hate speech says major online platforms have been embarrassed into taking action to prevent its spread. Thousands of farmers have flocked to the first day of Fieldays at Mystery Creek. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
But I also know from experience, having gone through the property purchasing process a number of times, sometimes you think, do I need to stretch myself this far? And then you look back 2 years later and you go, well, I'm glad I bought then.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
I imagine that that's a listener from Australia. So it's not an offence under the Migration Act to arrive in Australia without a visa.
Up to date if you're up late.